that too long without hitting the button. So then I was like, you don't have permission.
Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Nick Fox here. Teach and to give you some information on the fire department program. Greatly increase. Nice to be here. Everybody, like you're saying, my name is Ben Cox. I'm from Haliburton Fire Management. That's just up the highway from here, not the front. So that's where we sell the bottom. From there, fire in. That's from Ontario. Our home area encompasses the north side of all the way down to the corridor and from over to Georgian Bay. So that's the home area that I'm responsible for fire management. More importantly, fire smart and promoting public education on fire resiliency that homeowners can take for homes in case of firefighting.
Hello, everybody. I'm the fire manager and basically the local municipality. You're number 30 for me, so I've been doing this for a little bit while. I'm across Canada and Australia and the United States. I run one of our incident management teams from bigger matter fires. I've been in charge of the biggest fire in Ontario, the Northwest Territory. Seen a bit of fire and been through some of that stuff. I'm also certified off chief. You're just working with that, answer any questions and sort of by all means, if you go through, if you have questions for Kenny, whether he wants them as he's doing the presentation or whether it's better for you, you can wait and all questions again. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, what I'll do is immense amount of information I'm going to speak to. I'm going to speak to wildland fire management, wildland fire behavior, so you can understand how fire starts, how it spreads, and then get into mitigation measures that Fire Smart Canada promote for all of their safety. So if you hold your questions mostly for the end, I probably will answer them as I go through PowerPoint slide by PowerPoint slide. You'll have questions raised, and the next slide probably going to answer them. But by all means, write down your answers or remember them, or sorry, your questions, and I'll answer them the best I can. Attempt to answer at the end. That's why Bob helps me answer the question. With his 30 years and my 15 years, only half as much, I try to make up it. So, like we spoke about, I want to give you guys a picture of wildland fire response in Ontario. Ontario is a fairly large landmass. The Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry under delegation, the FFPA, Forest Fire Prevention Act. We're responsible for wildland fire management north of this squiggly line down here. Essentially, in this corridor, it runs along the Highway 7 corridor and everywhere north. We have an immense amount of landscape in Ontario to manage wildland fire. You can imagine all kinds of different forests, all kinds of different natural forces, from climatic events to insect infestations, all kinds of things that affect the forest and the way it burns. And Bob and I are trained, as well as the firefighters that we work with are trained to suppress fire in those forests all across Ontario. Furthermore, as Bob spoke to, we interchange with pretty much global agencies, Australia, and everybody from Mexico, States, up to Northwest Territories. We all interchange our roles. So there's a Kenny and there's a Bob, all over the province, as well as all over Canada, that we can fill each other's shoes if somebody's unavailable. And we do that on a regular occurrence. Hopefully we don't, but this summer we'll anticipate to probably go out to the Western provinces at some point. Vice versa, if we're really busy, the Western provinces, Mexico or Australia will come here to Ontario and help us, like I'll speak to you in a couple of slides. So here in Halliburton, we got 48 firefighters that are housed out of Halliburton every day, and they're pre-positioned across the area to the area that's the warmest or the hottest, that displays the highest hazard, and they're pre-positioned there for quicker response. Vice versa, that happens through all these other docks you see scattered across Ontario. They all have a very similar organization headquarters, just compared to ours, from each of those locations. So Cochrane also has 48 firefighters, and from there, they're responsible for wildland fire management within their response area, and they dictate where they want their crews, their aircraft, all that based on the hazards of the local region. Anyway, so that's kind of an overview of how we manage wildland fire response for the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. On top of that, we have 51 municipal partners in our area alone over the entire province, 27, so an immense amount of fire departments that we work with and we have agreements with to make sure that each municipal fire department or First Nation community firefighting team, as well as federal firefighting authorities, we all have agreements in place to make sure that we work collaboratively and efficiently together when somebody calls 911 and we need to respond. So that's us in a nutshell. Some of the tools we utilize, you probably see them on the news, CO415 water bomber. That's indicative of Ontario. I'm proud to say that you own, taxpayers own 9 of them at just under $40 million a piece. They're quite an asset for us for wildland fire response. Other aircraft that we use, you might see them if you're traveling about. You own as a taxpayer 7 EC-130 helicopters. You'll see them flying around. That's how our crews respond to fires very quickly. If you're out and about in forest fire, we'll usually respond via helicopter because it's a lot quicker for us to get that response, assess the fire, land, and start suppressing it, as opposed to driving in a truck. We also have larger helicopters as well. And these larger helicopters also have belly tankers on the bottom of them that make them dual capable. So not only do they take the firefighters to the fires, wherever they are in Ontario, they also can drop the firefighters off, pick up 250 gallons of water out of the nearest water body, and dump it on the fire right all in one shot. Very effective machine. So I want to give you guys an idea on what a wildland fire is in Ontario. In 2021, Ontario saw the most hectares burnt in the fire season since 1995. There's just over 1,200 wildland fires that AFFES responded to. That's not including the other 300 fires that municipal fire departments respond. There's a lot of fires in the landscape of Ontario at any given year. 2022 is the opposite of that spectrum. As you all know, and have had to deal with the devastation from that. The way the climate change works is sometimes you get periods of drought that can be conducted of primary effects, fire behavior, because it's drying up fuels right at that moment. A secondary effect, climate change, is what you all had to deal with through the derecho and extreme storm development. Daytime heating promotes aggressive storm cell development, and that's what we've seen here with the derecho storm. So although it doesn't in 2022 in the derecho storm, yeah, you got the heavy impact. No, you weren't fire inductive or inductive then, but now in the following years, for about 5 years from now or so, you will be inductive in terms of that type of a disruption. Does that make sense? So in all, just under 800,000 hectares of land was consumed by wildland fire in Ontario in 2021. And if you can picture, that's just a little bit bigger than the size of a continental province. Picture that on the map. So it's a large landmass. There's a map of all the fires that occurred. You'll see the majority of fires on the landscape in Ontario typically happen in the northwest region. That's not to say large-scale fires don't happen in the south. They certainly do. 2021, this is how the cards played out. Yeah, and that's what we dealt with. You can see there that you would think, well, the firefighting resources over in Red Lake north, they'd be escalated, and they were. So that's when Bob, myself, and other team mates travel around and help us out, and we're interchanging them. And vice versa. If you're super hot and dry, folks in Corner Red Lake will come here and help us. So wildland fire obviously has a lot of negative impacts on us humans, right? As we built and extended our lifestyles into the landscape of Ontario, wildland fires, when they occur, they almost certainly always have a negative effect, especially when they happen down in the southern Ontario. they're always within a couple kilometers, usually somebody's private property, somebody's place of residence, a vital transportation corridor, vital highway, highway corridor, or what I'm trying to get at, power line corridor. Fire's always threatening something down here in the south. That's why we're fully responding to them predominantly 99% of the times. The fire gets a full response down here in the south. Not only is negative impacts from wildfire from flames, but something that some folks don't think about very much is the smoke. And the smoke is probably more of a concern for fire managers like myself and Bob when we're dealing with large-scale wildfire and fire concerns. The majority of our concerns are coming from the smoke and the smoke impacts that's drifting 10, 15, 50, 100 kilometers away to other outlying communities. And that's one of our main concerns on top of flames that most of the time people are concerned. Now, that all being said, it's critical that we acknowledge wildland fire has numerous positive impacts for the environment. Here in Ontario, in the south, and throughout the north part of Canadian's boreal forest, those forests evolved as the ice sheets that 11,000 years ago, ice sheets were seen across the boreal forest and this part of regional Ontario. Those forests evolved to rely on fire to come through and cleanse that environment. Every 12 to 7 years, this area here would have seen a wildland fire occur right where we're standing. We know that from core sample analysis on white pine stems, the white pines that are still growing. If you take a core sample of a 200-year-old tree, you go back before Sterling Logging being the organizing municipality fire response, fire department, you would see scars on those white pines every 12 to 37 years that said, hey, fire came, had a fire, low intensity fire, burned at the base crown of that white pine. The white pine obviously survived because they're non-conductive to being by the wildfire. And that fire that tree can grow and then burn over again. That's how we know about that fire regime throughout Southern Ontario. When we started suppressing wildland fire, say for argument's sake, 150 years ago, which is quite to deny forest ecology and the way the forest developed, we heavily altered that landscape. Come in and we stop all wildland fires, get a buildup of debris that naturally burn every 12. Now you have 5, 6 cycles of that chain being broken. We've done a very good job of suppressing fires because they were threatening human values when we built our community, towns, our roads, our power lines, in a fire regime, in a fire adapted landscape that relied on fire to cleanse itself and benefit numerous species. Hope it works. Kirtland's warbler. Up north, woodland caribou, British Park. Down here, elk, moose, deer, they all benefit. Black bears, every species that you can name in Ontario benefits in some way or fashion from the natural disturbance of wildfire. So that's a critical aspect for the folks here living in this region of Ontario. So that's that on fire as an overview. I have a review. And what I'm going to get into now is based on teaching you how fires start and how fires spread. So effectively, you can break that chain because we don't want the fires to come close to your values, whether you live in a cottage, a home, a garage, whatever your value is. We don't want that fire to burn out, right? Obviously, so I'm going to teach you how to stop that. So fires start by 3 elements coming together. You fire guys don't blow me up on the fire hexahedron and all those good things, but we'll stick to the fire triangle, okay, for A-class fuels for forest fires. So you need heat, oxygen, and fuel to start a wildland fire and to have an A-class material combust. Furthermore, once you have that A-class material, woody debris, leaf, pine needles, whatever, starting to combust, then it's driven by topography, weather, and fuel, and that alters how it behaves from that point forward. You'll see here there's 2 common denominators. You got fuel and fuel. You can't change the topography really. Argument's sake, you can't move mountains, hills, all that good stuff. Weather, you can't change. Heat, you can't change the heat of the sun's rays. Oxygen, we can't change the oxygen content, obviously, of the earth, but we can change the fuel. And that's where Fire Smart Canada comes into play. That's how Bob and I manage wildland fire on the landscape. We alter the fuel in the path of the fire, either directly by nozzling it, dumping water on it, with water bombers, indirectly with bulldozers and whatnot, or Fire Smart Canada mitigation tactics of pruning spruce trees, leaving deciduous trees, and reducing the amount of buildup that a fire would be as it travels due course. I hope I explained that. Does anybody have any questions on fire behavior before I step into? Covered a lot of how much time do you think I covered in fire 101 basics? A little bit. Hopefully I nailed it. So here's an example of how wildland fire hero spread. I think we're, for argument's sake, are we right here? And yes, okay, good. I don't mean to touch your screen and get my grubby little hands all dirty on it. So all intents and purposes, it's May 24th. And you got two lightning strikes. Amazing, bad example. But anyways, we'll stick with it. You got two lightning strikes occur. One lightning strike occurs in conifer component. Conifer is a spruce tree, pine, for lack of better words. We'll just go with pine in general, and cedar. So evergreens. That's conifer component. You have a lightning strike in deciduous stand. So that's your maples, beeches, oaks, your leafed trees, your palmated leafed trees. When those lightning strikes occur, fires are going to grow in two very different ways. In the leafed stand, it's going to burn very slow, much slower compared to conifer stand, given the same weather parameters. So let's say it's 30 degrees out and the RH is 29, super hot out, nobody's out doing anything. We're all stuck inside doing the AC thing or swimming, our favorite swimming hole in the river. All things similar, wind speed and whatnot. This fire is going to grow a lot more quicker because of the conifer component, the evergreen, than a deciduous sand fire is going to. And after an hour, in those conditions that I just listed you as, with the temperature of 30 and RH 29, wind speed of, we'll say a wind speed of 15 for this instance, coming out of the northwest, this fire is going to double in size, whereas that fire is just going to continue to grow at maybe 1.5 meters a minute or so, just slowly move itself along in a low intensity format. Maybe flame heights as tall as my knees, maybe as high as my thigh. Whereas the fire down here in the conifer component is going to be a lot more of an extreme fire that you're going to see because of those conifer fuels. Conifer needles are a lot more drier than a maple leaf or an oak leaf. I think you guys can all envision that. That's why they grow a lot quicker. Another hour goes by. The fires burn at low intensity natural containment barriers. Once they hit anything like a rock outcrop, swamp, creek, when they're burning low enough intensity, they won't jump those natural containment barriers and they'll just die out. And that's how fires occurred on this landscape for tens of thousands of years. Vice versa, when a fire burns in the conifer forest, it's much more receptive. The conifer forest is much more receptive to spotting and growth. And the fires will jump natural containment barriers such as lakes, roads, and what have you. So that's another aspect of why conifer forests are a bit more hazardous in general than a deciduous forest. So if one was to practice fire smart, you can see I don't know who lives here. I don't want to pick on the home or whatnot, but from the imagery, this looks like a very cleaned up home. I can see green grass and no buildup of debris around this home. The fire burnt up, died, it jumped over the home, but it went around the home, didn't burn anything down. If they hadn't practiced whatever these techniques and that home lived right in with the conifer component, the home itself had lots of pine needle debris later built up on the rooftops and whatnot. And those embers are traveling aloft ahead of the fire. They'll build up on that home and they'll cause that home to combust. And unfortunately, so that's what Fire Smart Canada practice are going to speak to us about, and that's what we're going to learn about tonight. Kind of a fire 101 and how fire spreads and things, so you guys can understand. So Fire Smart Canada is not by any means an Ontario product. It's a national program put on by the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Compact. Right, Bob? Did I get that right? I never get it right, so I'm glad I got it right this time. It's a long title, and Kenny gets tongue-tied pretty easily. So yeah, Fire Smart Canada is a national program It's employed everywhere for anybody from industrial applications to homeowner applications, everything in between, from Yukon, Northwest Territories, over to North Newfoundland, all the way down to here in Southern Ontario, back across to Southern BC, British Columbia. Everywhere in Canada practices Fire Smart Canada techniques that we're going to talk about tonight. Furthermore, Australia also spent a lot of time working on their Fire Smart messaging, and it closely mirrors on. That's something definitely to be proud of as Canadians, that Fire Smart Canada tactics that we employ to save our homes and values is we're used worldwide and in the States. So Fire Smart Canada breaks down how we're going to save our values from wildland fire disturbances into 7 key disciplines. Vegetation management is on the top. Vegetation management, that so fuel being conifer, leaves, needles, anything that's flammable, debris buildup. Vegetation management speaks to the removal of those adjacent or on the homes. If you remove those fuels, you break that fire trend. That fire is no longer able to consume the home as it passes by. We also talk to development considerations. That's when installing new development. Provincial policy statement. We're not going to get into that. That's a whole other 2-hour presentation. We get into public education, such as this event. Also going out to schools, going out to Fire Smart events put on by cottage associations, municipalities. Anytime I get to go and talk to the public and educate them on wildland fire, we're abiding by the 3rd discipline of Fire Smart Canada. Legislation. So legislation in the form of new development. They have to apply Fire Smart Canada initiatives in the new developments, and that's really where the legislation buck stops for Fire Smart mitigation. Interagency cooperation with the fire departments, looking when there's not, and engage the public, hand out educational materials in front of the public. That's all a part of interagency cooperation. Lots of cross training and emergency planning. Firefighters, OPP, paramedics, you name it, anybody in emergency services, and including communities that don't have those services available, just community members themselves. We'll practice cross training and mock fire scenarios with them to make sure that, hey, if a wildland fire occurrence does happen, this is how it's going to go, and it's all the parts of the team that play. We'll know and who we report to, all those good things. There's a lot that comes into it. But for the sake of this presentation, we're going to speak primarily due to vegetation management. Fuel, like I spoke to before, fuels simply the term that fire folks use to speak to any fuel for the fire. So fire, when it hits fuel, that's close to homes. I know this is a brand new. Actually, you're the first group that I've gotten to present this to. It's brand new from Fire Smart Canada. Anyway, so it's a new image. And anytime that you have a buildup of flammable debris next to a home, that home's chances of being burned increase. Vice versa, you look at a Fire Smart mitigated property where things are cleaned up, stacks of firewood are greater than ideally 10 meters away from the building. We'll get into those specifics and whatnot. And the home itself is resistant to ember transport. So why do why do homes and things of human value burn? Predominantly 88% of the time. Fire Smart Canada says 90% of the time. So 88 to 90% of the time, it's embers and spark transport. So you can imagine if we were right outside this window right now, having a bonfire, and when you throw your Christmas tree on or some of your leaves that you're having, what happens? It emits sparks, right? We walk in there. I like to have fire safety. When that's permissible by the municipal fire department, right? Anyway, so when you throw those materials on, you get spark transport, even from a bonfire. And unfortunately, for my fire, I'm a captain. Well, not the fire service. Unfortunately, the fire calls just based on embers coming from a bonfire alongside of a home that caught the roof, home on fire, the house on fire, and then that home is going off fire from the bonfire embers. So ember transport is, again, 90% of why homes in Canada succumb to wildland fire. And the messages in the books, I think most of these all have little books in front of you, those homeowner manuals. All this directly, slightly different images, but same core concepts. If you take into consideration the roof, the siding materials, cleaning the gutters, cleaning underneath the decks, and cleaning on top of the decks, any buildup of flammable pine needles, leaves, and whatnot, when you remove those items, you're removing the fuel bed. When an ember travels aloft, bonfire, or can't land on it, start that home to combust. Lands on the dry pine needles in the roof, for example. That ember transfers its heat to the flame. That flame transfers its heat to the roof. Untreated wood shingles. The wood shingles come up relatively easily. If you have asphalt shingles, that's going to be a fire smart concept to those embers. Fire concept. That's going to be one of those instances where when an ember lands on the roof, and if you did have a buildup of pine needles and leaves and whatnot on asphalt, those burn out. Knock on wood, will burn out. Anytime you add in a valley or a peak or an intersection, when the embers collect and land in those areas, that's when you no longer have the protection of the shingle or the steel, and it'll be right against the siding. So whatever kind of siding you have, that's what's killing. If you can imagine, which we all can, in Ontario, we'll deal with winter all along for a long time. The way that snow drifts when in the wintertime, you probably have, I'm assuming the majority of you have, pockets on your house where snow house would get drifts, and pockets where there's no snow. That's how embers. Wherever on your home that you have a buildup of snow in wintertime, if you were to have a wildfire coming from the same general area where the winds come from, the embers are going to collect in the same places where the wind strips. So I hope that kind of paints a picture for you of how the embers transfer. Another method of which wildland fire transfers into a value such as garage is through direct flames. They account for about 12% of additional wildland fire occurrences that come into the home. And the extreme heat, radiant heat, accounts for a very slim amount, but it's still there. And that refers to a large buildup of flammable debris adjacent to the home that when it catches on fire, like a large bonfire that you're having right next to your home, you feel that radiant heat coming off of it. That radiant heat can transfer and cause the home to combust. Those are the three methods that fire goes from a wildfire into an interface fire, burning down a home or a valley. That makes sense, everybody? So when we speak to those three different types of and how a wildland fire, when it comes close to a home, threatens that said home, you ideally have three zones that FireSmart Canada speaks to. The immediate zone, 0 meters to 1.5 meters around the home itself. That's where FireSmart Canada puts the most emphasis, because 90% of the homes that are lost in wildland fire occur from ember transport. Those embers travel aloft, land in this zone, build up enough, like drifting snow, transfer that ember heat into a flame, that then cause the materials to combust on the home. That's how the home fails. So the immediate zone, if you have next to zero time to ever practice FireSmart tactics, but you have like one night here or there to clean up, please focus on the immediate zone, the priority zone 1 areas, in your debris off your roof and along the side of your home, free. So as if embers were to land there, they can't cause that freshly laid leaf litter, pine litter to combust and then transfer. As you go away further from the house, the impacts from the surrounding forest have less of an impact on the home succumbing to passing fire. So intermediate zone, as you get out, still vitally important, but not nearly as important as the intermediate zone techniques that FireSmart Canada puts on. So in the intermediate zone, 1.5 to 10 meters out, that's 30 feet from the home's edge, in your books, there's all kinds of different tactics in there for you to look at and employ to reduce fire behavior in this area and really diminish it. In the extended zone, even further yet, 10 meters to 30 meters, which is 100 feet from the home, then you're speaking to not having to remove everything. You know, you still got, obviously you live in Canada, and most of us, if you're like me, you heat your your house with wood, you still have to have things out in this area that that are flammable. That's fine. But what we're doing is we're pruning spruce trees to reduce the amount that's there flammable to burn for the spruce tree, or the dead down debris. In your case, Horatio storm, the amount of dead buildups of debris right along the adjacent side of that building. The more you reduce, the less intensity fire is going to burn them. So if you clean it all up and it's down to mineral soil, well, then it's great. There's 0% chance of you ever going to have a wildland fire within that zone. But that's not practical. That's definitely not practical for my house. I certainly know it's not practical for the majority of folks in here today living in this area. But what they speak to is taking the core concepts of pruning spruce trees, cleaning, raking yearly, maybe once in the springtime, cleaning all the buildup of dead material in that zone, reducing it so you reduce that flaming intensity in this extended zone to reduce the radiant heat that building's exposed. Hopefully that makes sense. It's all in the books too. I think it's on page, oh geez, it's in my notes, but I won't waste time here with my notes awkwardly. It's on the pages in your manuals. Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Mulch.
Oh.
Some of that stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to speak to that, I just want to hear that, so that's one of the things people don't realize. You'll be in my those too, that black mulch, up against your house, or everything else, but it's very dry, but it's only possible. Is, I mean, it looks good, but if people, I know it's more of like river rock, or nice white and gravelly stuff. When you talk about your wood pile up from the thing, I know it's really convenient, everybody pile of wood ready to walk away basement door, it's under the deck. Problem is that sitting there in that case, all the hammer. Fire there, you get the hammer. Goes right into that wood, it blows into the little. And or hardwood that's on fire. What's extremely convenient if you're looking to mitigate the hazards of fire is I know it's not easy. Don't have the mold against your house and keep firewood stacked away from it. Those are two of the major reasons why.
Yes, question mark.
So speaking here, personally, there is.
Oh, well, that's perfect.
Yeah.
There's the alternative to that. I don't want to say don't do it then whatsoever. There's an alternative. That's perfect. But look for those alternatives, something that's very rather than spring.
And secondly, Fort Mac and California have 100 feet.
So we talked about some of that too. You'll see in some of the literature in there. The primaries we talked about are up to the 30 mark because that is the really needed. This is the primary area. If you can keep 100 feet from your house on fire, you take out so much radiant heat and everything else. Every 7 feet away from your water, you feel less radiant heat coming off it. You have your forest fires. I've worked on fires where the fires right up in the treetops, you know, adjacent to where I'm at, and step back a little bit and down it does that. The 100-meter out is there. That's the nice too. You got obviously the more you do, the better off you are. Really focused on that 30-meter properties. The 100 meters, if you got time, is really nice. Obviously, you have to work with scale, pretty back, and everything else. And in that 30-meter zone, everybody likes an extreme lawn. That is one of the best things to keep across the
And considering the circumstances, fire roads now being on the ground, which is tremendous. Not be stuck in work
Well, again,
Fire load not affecting radiant.
It is going to affect radiation. And it's the same thing with one fire, you put things on with one fire, you step away from it, you feel the radiation drop drastically. If you're 100 feet from that fire, yeah, there's gonna be a lot of intensity of it, but you'd be amazed at how much intensity is dropped down on that as you come into that. Yeah, the chief be able to take so give me a pretty good rundown on a lot of people. Some of the devastation, it's terrible to look at that. I was also looking at some of the fuel oil in there, it's going to be very intense fire. Some of that stuff, there's no real about it, which and also looking at intense fire. I don't see it as a super fast fire in some of the fuel that's in there. Now, obviously, we've got something in there, we have experts on fire behavior, tell us exactly how fast and act on some of that, so we have the people around some of those numbers.
Is that being done preemptively or not?
It's hard to do preemptively. What we do have is we have the forest fire in. Studies done across Canada. I've actually worked with at the International Burn Site in Northwest Territories. Down here, fields, different types of components. And we have what which is, so the temperature is this, the relative humidity is this, and our wind speed is this. We can look at it and it tells us this is what we expect from fire behavior in these. We can just click boxes. With that, because we had a dry weekend, we were staffed up. Obviously, now we didn't have anybody down here with their repositioning down in this area. So, with weather stations, not scattered. Second is every morning we run. This is what we. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we do our next meetings, and then we rerun everything and say, here's what we can actually.
So if the ball drops, what is the response
I can't guarantee that because it'll.
time? Guess what I'm asking, where they're coming.
Depends on where it is. Sometimes we'll have local helicopters, we have a station that we're based on. Bancroft, we won't do that often. We'll move air attack down in the scope. So flight time is that far down there with those. If we have a fire rate in that area, depending on the severity of what we get for the initial reports, either whether we're or it is, we can make a phone call within 5 to 10 minutes here.
All right.
We're in the 25 years. I think you can obviously see some of the stuff in there. It's just maybe put people in or actually ours are all water bombers that skim off lakes.
So the dry timber and the fire double every hour. Could you expect that potentially to triple, double every hour? Fire that you have.
Again, it falls under some of the slash that we have for actual fire behavior predictions. I can't tell you what any fire is going to do. I've had days where it says these fires are going to get up and they're going to take off 60 meters, and then there's nothing we're going to be able to do. Get there and sitting on the ground not doing anything. Do what it is. Other fires are doing more than you should see. All we can do is make the predictions. You see, what we do for this one, fire guys. It's hard to every scenario we have on that and tell you exactly what the fire's going to do. Because the fire breaks out just over there and it's in one type, the way the trees fell down, the way you walk with the line that's there, it's going to react differently or the way you walk for another. So it's really hard to plan exactly what the fire's going to do. Yeah, exactly how it works.
Now, as far as the local guys plan for that.
So part of that would end up being what the fire chief has in part of that, communication plans that are for the area. For ourselves, if we come in, properties are, send our staff in.
I'll break it down too, a little bit more. Thanks, Paul. So, just like you guys were speaking to, just about there, I want to hammer home the fire smart distances and the messaging that they're bringing forth. So here's the fire smart messaging that you have in your books, and it's all great and fine and dandy as a diagram, but does that actually apply to real world? And it certainly does. So I can attest to Bob's. I'm sure Bob, you've seen it just as much as I have. This is a fire that I was on in my career that I was responsible for. I didn't make it to this home in time to save it. I was responsible for it because it was evacuated. It had been evacuated for about 7 days before the fire was going to get to it. And I had the resources and whatnot to deal with the wildfire, but I couldn't get all my resources to the entire fire line. Fire blew up. 6 of the neighbors' homes didn't make it. This home did make it. Why? Because they practiced fire smart. That's the only reason their home lived, and the neighbors didn't. So you can see here, as the fire was burning towards it, you can imagine your devastation that you have here with slash fields. We call it slash fields, sorry. That's the downed material that's flattened from the tornadic events. This forest was the high hazard forest. It was predominantly a C2 boreal spruce out in the outer line area, which is what you guys have, but about 20 feet tall with the immense amount of spruce conifer component. I'm going to get really technical here. The only reason why is because I just want you to understand it, that we have a good understanding of it. So, if a fire comes through, the typical slash field is going to put off 4,000 kilojoules of heat. When a wildland fire goes through a C2 stand with the same exact weather parameters of being extreme, it's going to put off 6,000 kilojoules of heat. That's a lot of more heat. Picture being next to this bottom fire that's stable, take 4 steps back, you can no longer feel the heat. Okay, that's how hot that your slash is going to burn. You picture the fire behavior in the season and the messaging that Fire Smart Canada plays. That's based on a secure spruce conifer stand. You'd have to take 6 steps back to not feel it. So the messaging of the distances for Fire Smart Canada is speaking to boreal spruce, and the boreal spruce is going to burn a lot more intense than a slash field type. That's what the Fire Smart Canada distances are built on. So I hope that brings a little bit of confidence into these numbers. Say, hey, these are accurate numbers for your circumstance, even though it's a flattened stand. These numbers are built on a mature spruce stand that exhibits a lot more heat, radiant heat, off of same given weather parameters of similar burning stand. Does that make sense? Cool. So that's why these numbers are there. As this fire burnt, this mature spruce stand, it transferred into a ponderosa pine stand as it got closer to the Douglas fir stand, actually. So that's Douglas fir, a little one. As it got closer to home, in the background, you can see the spruce trees were all torched off. You can just barely see it there. That was a full crown fire. That was putting off intensity class 6,000 kilojoules of heat off that fire, off that flame front. As the fire got closer to the home, into the intermediate zone, into the extended zone, into this transitionary period where the people took out the spruce tree component and the conifer tree component, reduced the amount of material there readily available to burn. That fire went from a high intensity fire to a low intensity fire, and then creeped through these zones because you can't get rid of all the flammable material. You live in the real world. You just can't. What you can do is reduce it. So as if a fire did occur, it's a low intensity. As that fire creeped through the remaining fuels at a low intensity, it got close to the intermediate zone. The intermediate zone, right around the home itself, followed the fire smart tactics and had no combustibles in that zone. The fire burnt up to it and out. The home was safe. Furthermore, the home wasn't receptive to ember transport. And so I'm going to break that down for you right now because I have time, and that's why I got invited here to speak to you. Yes, question.
Those zones, do they change if you're at the top or right?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, actually, yes, they do. So if you're at the bottom of a hill and you have a fire coming downhill towards you, fires, that zone would be effectively smaller. If not the same, but small. If you had a building at the top of a hill, you would have to extend that zone. And the booklet does tell you how to extend the zones on a page. I don't have them right offhand or whatnot. Let's say you had a 45-degree slope. The extended zone would be then doubled for a 45% slope. Does that make sense? Because when a fire burns more intense uphill and more rapid uphill as it preheats the fuels ahead of it. Or it burns slower down. That's a really good question. Glad you asked. Thanks. So the home itself, this is the bread and butter of fire smoke. This is what I'm here to speak to you about. So this home was saved because, not just because of greenery, but because of short burns. It doesn't have to be, since it's not gonna be able to walk jobs that need it now. Public fires, grass is always green, maybe you don't even have grass. What's important is that around the home itself, it's non-conductive to the fire spread. So you can still have dirt and whatnot around the home, but when a fire comes to it, stop. The home itself, it's really hard to see. I should have blown it up next time for the next presentation. There's a concrete cinder block foundation there of non-combustible siding material. So the siding here is vinyl. Vinyl is not that recommended by Fire Smart Canada because it melts from immediate heat. It melts off the side of the home, exposes very tinder dry particle board or plywood underneath it, and when embers land on that part, then it causes bust. But this home reduced the intensity, so it didn't get that radiant heat, and it has a non-combustible about 12-inch to 18-inch gap between where the embers would have landed. The embers did land here, and they burnt out. They couldn't contact that vinyl siding, which was separate from the floor of the ground. That makes sense? Got that? And it's all in the book there. Secondly, you can see that the roof and the eaves are clean of any pine needles, buildups, and debris. So they did a good job on that, and it's clean. These trees here that they have is as ornamental shrubs. I'm glad I got through ornamental. That's a word that always gets stuck up. The ornamental bushes around the home are deciduous. If you had a juniper ornamental bush or a cedar tree ornamental bush, or spruce tree, conifers, the embers certainly landed on these and this died out. It's a deciduous tree, like I showed, non-conductive or spread. So, you burn out chances and that's what happened here. Collected here, just burnt out against deciduous shrubs and didn't cause them to combust. If that was a juniper or a cedar or a spruce, it would have certainly caught on fire given the dryness of this fire. And when it caught on fire, it would have put the house at risk and to having amount of heat right beside the building. And then you would have died. So that's why we speak to removing flammable debris all around the home. You can still have ornamental plants. Try to make them deciduous that are less conductive to fire spread. Fire Smart Canada has a whole list of different species that both look good and are fire smart throughout this growing regime. So what are we here? Are you 5A growing region? Any planters? Any horticulturalians? No. Anyway, so whatever zone you're in, if you're in 5A, 4A, 3, as you transfer up north, there's different parties zones for different plant species. Fire Smart Canada has recommended Fire Smart plants for each of those zones as you transfer up north up to Quanah, up on the shores of Hudson Bay. Yeah, it's not in this book, but it's available on Fire Smart Canada. Landscape. So furthermore, I wanted to talk to the deck, and you can't see it from the panorama. When I stood here, I took the panorama view on my cell phone. I didn't get the deck, but the deck also had, you can just barely see it underneath, no buildup of flammable materials underneath the deck. Just taking that into consideration, same standards as the roof. Imagine if you have a buildup of pine needles, leaves, debris up on the roof, the embers land on it, they catch that on fire. Vice versa, the same thing happens to the deck. What's unique about decks is, I'm guilty of it, underneath the deck is usually where I try to hide and jump, right? You try to hide your firewood, your building materials that you didn't use up, your decks, your cedar shake, whatnot underneath there. Make sure you remove that. I did it after I got smart, got this job, and figured it all out. But anyway, when you have all those materials there, it might seem like a good spot to hide, and it is. But embers, like snow, will find all the cracks, little crevices, and whatnot, just like snow, and they'll build up underneath that. Even though you have the deck boards on top and it might be skirted and everything, I strongly recommend And Fire Smart Canada strongly recommends moving anything flammable from underneath the deck because it will travel through your deck boards. Your deck can cause whatever's underneath them to combust. Whatever's underneath the deck is called a dry tube. It's somewhat protected from the last rainfall. That makes sense? So those are a few tips on that structure itself. You'll also notice there's an outer line shed. It's very important that any outer line sheds close to your homes or that are of value to you, you hold them to the same standards as your house. If this structure, this little structure, was closer to the home and it caught on fire, it would act the same as a spruce tree or a juniper bush. Catches on fire, it would then subject your dwelling to an immense amount of heat from that shed catching on fire, wood shed and whatnot. Keep your wood sheds and your garages to the same standards as your dwelling that's next to your dwelling. Does that make sense? Within these zones. So that's the immediate zone in itself and the structures. As you move away, it's okay. It's okay to have privacy and all those good things as well. A really hard balance and a really hard buy-in for Fire Smart Canada. I know I'm buying them, but I am a little bit behind, 4 minutes behind where I want them. But it's really important that you realize any law at Fire Smart Canada aren't expecting you to give up the privacy, especially for those of you that live really close to neighbors and whatnot. But it's important for you to know that you can still have your privacy by either pruning conifer trees that you don't want to lose for whatever reason you don't want to lose them to a standard of 2 meters crown base height from the ground. When you do that, a wildland fire travels along the ground just like it did here. You see how these trees were pruned and the fire wasn't able to get up to the crown because it was pruned from 2 meters crown base height to the forest floor. The fire burnt along, it didn't cause that tree to catch on fire. If you didn't do that, if you had a spruce tree that was unnaturally pruned or not pruned, and you had ladder fuels that extended from the top of the crown all the way to the forest floor, you then provide, we call it ladder fuels, and it's essentially a ladder for fire to grow up and evolve the entire tree. So as the fire would come along, it would hit those tree brows that are touching the ground, and it would climb up the tree and burn the entire tree, immersing an extreme amount of heat, radiant heat from that tree. So if you prune it and remove that, put a 2 meter space in there, that fire is just going to burn low intensity underneath it and not cause that tree to burn. And you can still have a conifer tree there, but it's just going to reduce that intensity. Make sense? That's how that happens. As you progress further and further away, you might live in an area that exhibits all spruce stand or pine stands, right? Well, that's fine and dandy. There's other tactics in here once you get into the extended zone of selective harvest or removing trees within about 3 meter crown closure of each other. If you remove trees from touching each other, you're about 3 meters apart. If a tree were to catch on fire or does catch on fire, it won't catch the next tree on fire. So you're preventing crown to crown fire going to a surface fire, making it become a surface fire because you're disrupting that continuous fuel load of conifer tree by making a 3 meter gap in between each tree. So as you extend further from the house, you can do little tactics like that if you can, if you own the property. By no means do I want you to go home and tomorrow cut down your neighbor's trees on your neighbor's property. You got to ask for permission and have this conversation wherever we're at. Yeah, that's that in a nutshell. So here's what we're after: extended zone fuel management. You have typical forest buildup of flammable materials before Fire Smart mitigation tactics, and after fire mitigation tactics. Sorry. So you clean it up. If you had a fire occur in this instance with extreme weather parameters, you'd have an extreme fire behavior and rate spread and a great amount of intensity, threatening the nearby homes, throwing off lots of embers. Vice versa, when a fire travels through here, it's going to be low intensity and it's not going to emit a lot of embers that are going to threaten nearby homes. Make sense? That's what you're all after. So ultimately, this applies anywhere where forest meets community. That's called interface or intermixed interface for Fire Smart Canada. And here in your area, all the homes are in that region, right? So you can all certainly go home and apply these techniques when you're scheduled for it. Surrounded by, that being said, come back to the second slide when I was presenting, and I spoke to bonfires next to your home. You should still practice fire smart techniques, even if you're not on a forest area. Have a bonfire right next to your home, you emit a bunch of sparks. The sparks land on your dwelling, catch that dwelling on fire, that's a bad deal. The fire smart tactics of treating the home itself and reducing all the debris, build up the materials, cleaning your roofs, cleaning your gutters, cleaning the decks off, cleaning underneath the decks, you remove all that flammable tinder, then you'll eliminate any sparks threatening the integrity of your home. And that's really where we want you to focus, that immediate zone, working your way out to the intermediate zone and then to the extended zone as you have time allows. 90% of the homes will be saved, well, that are lost, occur from member transport to the immediate zone. So if you spend all your time and you only do the immediate zone, you just increase your home's resiliency 90% effectively, right? And anything after that, yeah, you have a question?
Yeah. Propane tanks. Diesel. So, was there a safe distance? Property?
Well, I would, for the sake of your neighbor, I wouldn't say no, not your neighbor's property. But yes, so there's no special holders, but no, what they do promote is having or if you have fuel storage for your tractor farms and whatnot, clear crop granite or clear crop limestone. That's situated in your houses, even your tank is situated on a stone about 1.5 meters around of the propane, gasoline tank, whatever you have. Have that another down and where it's situated, that applies in the same fire first. Good question. And the same applies as a structure. So as you move away, you obviously don't want all your firewood stacked right up against your diesel valve or your gasoline valves or your propane. Same thing applies. So the same distances that you apply to your dwelling, you apply to your.
Deep this. You decide you want to put a.
Oh, that's a really good question. So here in Sector 1 in Southern Ontario, a lot of the bottom fires are responding fires that burn in the ground. The fires burn kind of three. They can burn fully in bulk. They can be surface fires, so fires burning that we can see, or they can be underground fires. Underground fires will burn as deep as there's fuel there to burn. So they could burn up to 3 meters deep if there's peat moss that you're having a fire smolder down into and peat. So that being said, it's not a flame underneath the ground, it's ember burning, and the embers continue to burn like a cigarette butt. Doing a cigarette butt, burning there on the table, you see that ember slowly transfer to the cigarette butt. That's what's happening underground, and that's how fire transfers. Most often it's through old white pine or red pine tree stumps. And when you pull the tree stump out of the ground, you've got all the root. When you don't pull it out of the ground, and that tree's decayed, you have channels underneath the ground, and that's where the embers will travel. So really it depends on what kind of soil. If you're on a gravel soil, it won't burn underneath it. If you're on an organic peat moss, it could be fire. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Good question. Okay, so well, that's great. I just hammered you with all kinds of information, right? So now you get to the question of, well, how do you do about that, right? What do you do with that? What I really found successful in the Muskoka region and the Haliburton region where we are is promoting the Wildland Fire Community Preparedness Day. And that's something that Fire Smart Canada promotes nationwide. It's May 6th this year. So on May 6th, if you get together with a neighbor or two, practice what I've taught you, practice what's in your book, visit firesmartcanada.ca and check out more techniques and take the 101 app, learn more about wildland fire, what we just went through. Take some photos of yourself doing it involve your local fire department, have them maybe come out or just talk to them about it and say, hey, we're gonna do a cleanup, would you like to come over for a photo op or whatnot? Be able to do that, compile it, and then starting November 30th-ish, happened last year, but November 30th of the next following year, you'll be able to apply for Canadian Fire Smart Neighborhood Grant. And there's $500 grants. You can use that grant to then make your Fire Smart Day even bigger for your community the next year, by on hot dogs and snacks or foods and beverages to involve more neighbors and have it grow in that aspect. So that's one aspect that we want to have kind of a yearly annual cleanup day commence. And this year it's on May 6th and it's Fire Smart Wildfire Community Preparedness Day. Yeah. That's one way they can do it. And that's it. I'm 10 minutes behind where I want to be. Well, 6 minutes. 6 minutes. I must have picked up some speed somewhere. But anyway, so with that, I spoke really briefly to Fire Smart Canada CA 101 Fire Smart course. I can't even fathom enough how much I want to emphasize on that. Go to firesmartcanada.ca, click on the 101 Fire Smart course. It's awesome. It's a 1 hour course. It talks a lot more in depth. And I'll speak to all the trainers on Fire Smart 101 course. On mobile device, you can get your nephews, nieces, kids, grandchildren to do it. It's a really good learning opportunity. It's something that I actually get our firefighters to do once they go through the core firefighter training, but to give them some law and fire knowledge for mitigation. Really good. From you. Sound good? So on top of that, there's lots of materials in the back. I know you all have the homeowner's manual. So that homeowner's manual goes through the techniques and more thoroughly that I spoke to. There's also a homeowner's assessment. So the Fire Smart homeowner's assessment is just that. It's a document that allows you to go home and score your own personal ability, see where you fall in the sport, where you should improve, where you can focus, and if you want, wasn't obvious, right? So it goes down to zone 1. That's the zone. That's asked what type of roofing material do you have. If you have unrated wood shakes, your shingle fixed, you automatically get a score of 30. If you have any of the other ones, metal or asphalt shake, you get a score of 0. At the end of it, when you tally it all up, as long as you have a low score of a low score of under 21, probably means your home is going to live as it stands. If you have a score of 30 to 35, there's some work there to do, and look and see where you score high and act those change and address them. If you score 30 extreme, 35 or greater, there's some work there. It's just a simple tool to help you analyze where you could look at. So it goes hand in hand with more training. Yeah, I don't know if the person that works though.
Yeah, so insurance wise, what would I know of, right? Companies that adopt first commercial reduction. Yeah, that part is for the reduction. I think I'm sure they adopt that. That's on 100%, but not nice. So one of the other things is we went through this, something that popped in my mind is we talked about how we're going to try and reposition down the seat as it built. So just to give you an idea of what we did to be able to move people down this way, we could participate grant out and we could use some workforce and that. So we had a huge influx of our staff in today. So over the next few days, we're going to have a lot more available. Because we were on the weekend, a little bit less. What we did is we had Sudbury move people down into the very south area. We had Monday move people from Pembroke, we had up from the northern part of the sectors, and on the southern part. We're within our region for trying to move resources around and make sure we're able to help walk from that swamp. We are taking the damage done. We are running our numbers. Do that, we have to ask for more help.
Danger go down, that's logging.
Well, obviously with that, it's more the material that gets moved, obviously. Is I see through numbers out operations down in the area and I'm looking for on the fire chief, shows a lot of spots today in there and show a lot of people that actually happening already. Oh, sorry. But it's.
Sometimes more.
But we were able to look at a lot of the stuff there today and we've seen a lot of work.
But, I like I know what's. But actually. That's go down.
Yeah, I mean, brush it, kind of find you, so it. Obviously, it's massive, in there. Maybe a bit more concerned, it's good brush, it's getting pulled in the back, there's probably. Back there. Having beverage or something. Brushing, that way. Other options, backfill or have a trim.
So the big takeaway, just like Paul. We got kind of pretty often. We could burn it, providing to. I don't store it there. Burns enough, maybe so. Right, doesn't need it. You can ship it, stick off. Or you can have a removal. Now you gotta admit, like, I don't know what your local van charging for a meter of trucking and whatnot. For me, that's not just the achievable. So what I like to do is ship it. And those wood chips, like Paul said, wood chips break against your home, not a good day. But wood chips and mulch raising fun because when you spoke to it, when you spoke to how long has fire. Ideally, the fire department and our would be not always there to be able to put it up on time. But if you reduce it and make it enough that it's more fire in that extended zone, fine. Work on it. That help? Sorry, elaborate on your elaborate.
Turbo control work.
Like, organized. A prescribed 20 acres.
You're talking on large scale. This.
Every understood, we have an entire fire. Have manpower available. We have training funds available through the Empire Fire Department, like not just do some dry burns of. We plant the bush and eliminate the problem as it seems fit. Obviously, you can't do that. But I'm sitting on 100 acres of pine that I can't cut, and I can't even get a truck. And then it backs on to 1,800 hectares. Right.
So part of that is you can't get a truck in the
Exactly. Why can't we look at doing?
again, it's the same thing with staff. You can't get truck access. We're doing prescribed burning, and what is the access for staff getting, what are the boundaries? And there is a cost. A lot of times aircraft.
And I understand that, but having said that, the cost for the bush cleanup, I got 2 quotes, some odd $1,000. That ain't gonna happen on my $45,000 paycheck.
I can do
Yeah. So that was in there, it's gonna sit there. It's gonna sit there. Now, the last 3 storms we've had, just recently, I've had 3 lightning strikes already in that report, and I'm not in that sector. It's just a matter of time, it's gonna go. And you talk about, you can't prescribe herbs to get people. Well, the whole thing goes up. You just let it go.
Well, part of that is, and it's almost the same thing. I'm not looking at it, it's almost the same thing, that when you have a natural fire, the diversion there, and you let it go back on it. You have the staff that are in there, the aircraft, and people who are talking at that time, you're almost doing a prescribed burn. And one of the things, like, in order to do a prescribed burn, be able to go, and you have to have absolute ideal conditions, and you have to meet 100% actually on the plane. So it gets difficult to try and come up with that many bird plans and actually have people and resources.
Also, the help, $113,000.
And I understand that, and I mean, I know it's, people are looking to see what answers we have in there, the only answer we have right now is to be able to provide the material to protect our house and best we can on that. From our side, we're gonna do our best to put resources down in the areas. Awesome. And
So what kind of response time, I know I've asked this. You guys are. Full time, before you even dispatch M&R. And you guys dispatch a plane, this, and then where it comes from. We're into the 2-hour mark.
Yeah, so there's
And you talk about the fire, possibly true.
yeah, so the reason why I spoke to fire, that was really so y'all understand how honor makes or more promotion of fire growth versus the cities. On wildlife fire bird in the national landscape, learn. Or it's because of the time of the week. So if you not the deciduous point next to your homes, that reduces fire spread and slows that fire down. So that's why I spoke to. As far as the fire growth, the fire moving 2 hours in total that I expected of, that's there's so many parameters there.
Yeah. You guys don't run at night.
Yep, that's right. So
So now we're talking evacuation. Been through.
there's 2 ways to put the fire in. Where it takes a fire. If I started a wildfire and you're outside the building, you're not letting me go. But I drop a match and roll. It takes about 4 to 5 minutes for that fire to grow. To a speed where your establishes where it will grow at the same 1 meter per minute. It takes a lot of time for fire to get that.
So, you give me an exact idea how quick you can have these control. So when we put somebody on radar, it's fine. All of a sudden, fire in this area, you're on radar. The helicopter needs to have a turn. Soon as we believe the hazard coming up, that's how we. If today it's a little bit less than we have. I never gave you an exact, but no, I'm gonna be here and just, our timing is 5 minutes on a regular basis, and on the weekend. And in between, we're,
A lot of hours in the past. It did dispatch under it's. So you're an hour flight time.
so,
And then you have to be.
so part of that, they load on the radar. Part of it is, you gotta have an airport that's out. We're also looking at the entire region. You have to be we can call up and again. We call up, we get a call. Ask whether it's. Okay.
But to say a fire can burn on 2 hours.
I think what's important that we're doing everything that we possibly can. We're trying to assure.
I'm not sure if that's helpful.
No, we are doing what we can. There's nothing more that we can do than work with the parameters that we have. The government's only given us a limited amount of money. We've asked for way more money to go in and start to help you. We didn't get it. We're allowing the federal government to see if they will match at least. These guys are here to try and find some assurance what you can do to protect your home. That's the first thing we want to do. Protect our homes and the people. That's what our goal is. There's going to be fires. We know there will be fires. These guys are putting in place this program and working with our fire chief over there and our deputy chief. We're going to arrange for that. If something does happen, we will respond as soon as we possibly. But there are going to be times, we know, that things might not happen the way we want. But at least if we're all working together on this, aware of what's done to help us, well then we will do what we can to make sure that we can address these
I
things.
understand that, fully, not necessarily helpful.
Well, no, but it is for anybody who isn't. But
I've been out these
Okay,
rivers
and it's
for
also-
20 years.
also important for us. Those trees right, they go to bridges, which is very costly.
How long have you been here?
I've been here for 15 years.
What's your, like, I've seen numbers. Seen the ice flood.
I'm we
We're
work with you.
reviewed all these rivers.
I know there are a lot of people who are concerned about the issue of fires. And we're addressing their concerns as well as. I'm sorry, I have to lay it out for everyone. Any questions?
Yeah, I got. Personally, this is kind of talking on both sides. Want to reduce all the fuel, whatever we can. But, couldn't conservation go? We're not moving. And I'm going, how can you not take up clean down? There's no way in hell this matter. And the conservation area, it's just whatever we want. That, and it's just right there. I got now. Yeah, fine.
So there's,
So, I mean, I think the industry has to come up with a bit of. Either you want all this fuel taken out, or you want. By nature.
So, yeah, and unfortunately, we're going on two different sections. And I understand what your frustration. When it comes to us, we're saying, please protect your house. If you do this where smart stuff right now, this is the best chance we have to protect you. When it comes to the logging site, the salvage cut, that's under the regional operations division section of the MRF. I have no expertise in logging. I have no idea that kind of stuff. My career is
Talk about the conservation.
And again,
This is
that's,
the view.
yeah,
It wants to be.
and again, I understand the frustration, but I can't speak for a different part of our ministry.
It's all the same thing.
Well, I guess in the general line, I understand that we are in a different part of the. Can't speak conservation. I wouldn't want to have to guess why they're trying to do that or not. Vision be able.
I get some. Both conservation authorities on either side are both seats.
And again, because I don't know that, I can talk to you about how a fire burns and how to stop it somewhere, but outside of that, I outside of the,
We're on the
they. The river. We've got 20 to 30. There's a work on, the conservation as well, we roast this side. We have price house on this side. Over 100. That's not.
Very nice.
Also. What about all the trees on the side?
No, that's what we're going to do, right? We will probably. Okay, only because we don't want to get in there right now. And then, what we're going to be doing, once we get all of the applications. Yeah, we don't want to move. Right away. As they start, we will wait and start doing. Okay, and the other thing, we'll be sending people out in advance to look at the properties. I'll have an idea. So we'll be doing that soon. And then I will start to. So the ditches are going to be bunch of to read it. Mind you, we only have 1 property that's 150,000. Or 20 acres was that? So, you know, this is very, very expensive. I mean, we're lucky we got one. We were fighting hard because we started this.
We cleaned up.
We did a lot. No, we asked for money. We took. And yeah, no, we were forced to keep that. Yeah, no, we asked. That's what I know. Trying not to help some people.
That's the same. The neighbor, he touches all year. Now you, and you know, it's okay. I was forced to clean up. I'm not gonna get paid.
But it's not fair. But it's for. And they're saying this is a little bit 1.2. But they're telling us how. They're telling us how we can.
How's that?
Yeah, they came up.
Favorites. Yeah. Not there, really.
And hopefully when we around the rest of the stuff.
Looks like they're shooting on that. Logs and
Yeah. We're gonna do what we can, like I said, we're also not. Province said there was $0 a day. No, we're gonna fight this. So we fought, and so since, and then they came forward with something. Now, I've been out in touch with her, and I've also said to her, she told me that there's no money because federal disaster. Yeah. So I'm saying since they are already told, they were able to. You must be able to look around, and I'll work with you. I'll go to Ottawa, I'll work with you, and let's figure out what the departments can come up with some money to match it at least.
Number one. First, allowable application. Number two, current class staff. Why can we not approach each county as a province and you readdress fire disaster, potential fire disaster? That conversation, Ministry of Emergency Affairs or something. It went on for an hour and a half, and she took it back to her people. That is a possibility.
But so originally, this affairs in the house, and we talked, we asked for delegation. You know? What is that delegation? There's- In our pitches, we were talking, as we're devastated. After people are living, could it be a forest fire, or could it be? Or actually speaking. A terrible disaster. Ministry of ministry. Delegation, they wouldn't even. However, we asked them, okay. Why did you turn us down? We did not meet pressure. Tell me what it is. I know. Nobody will give me it. Can't get an answer. But when we did have the delegation, that's the one that we stay our member of the provincial parliament. They listened, and then we got some great coverage. There was Hayes Hideaway, and then there was the Vanguard, and I think and started getting a lot of. What happened is we got others. That was a caution. People were wondering, why is this not being taken care of? And so that's when Minister Smith, Greg Smith, is that Greg Smith, he came forward and he elected to want to identify 5.5 million municipalities in Eastern Ontario. By direct work. And when you think of it, 22 municipalities eligible for 5.5 million. We did well. We did. Hastings County got almost. So we did well as a county. But we did everything we possibly could. I'm not, as far as I'm concerned, there are events going to be more. And we need to have a when a disaster. Everybody was there. Presidents have to move in that direction. Way more. 5 major weather events in this area over the last year. Belleville, you had it on Echo, you had it in Peterborough, you had it. They were a different. So we need to do something. That's my next. Once I get funding, how do we prevent this from happening? And if anybody's got any ideas on how to get money to help you and you, I'm all open. We'll do whatever we can to do. This is a fight that I'm not finished. We started back with our town hall on this first time we were able all to be together. And that was very powerful. It helped us. So everybody can hear. And we'll continue to be. I want to thank you all. Really want. Thank Bob and Kenny for coming here today and walking us through this excellent presentation. We're so grateful that you were here. We're grateful that you will be here. I know you services. And that's been very reassuring for some. Any other questions of our guests? Oh, well, probably the fire guys are going to step yes. Sorry, go ahead. This is question.
I'll stand up your eyes, bottom, and then we'll see you. But just sitting back here, almost as what you guys have gone through, I wish you all that. So see devastations, no way more through height and frustration that you're dealing with. But I'm just gonna back Tom, he says, we're not done making calls. We are going every route we can. We're trying, we're not done. We're not gonna leave you stranded. We are still going, invest money in the government. It wasn't enough and we knew. They told us what we could do with it. Fortunately, we have to follow what they state. The best we can. These guys tonight came in, they're helping us out. But just so you know, we're not gonna make calls. Ron said we will go to the vet as we have to, but we're not gonna be quiet about it. Maybe we'll go away a year, we just. Their home is your home, we care about it just as much as you. So I'm in the municipal office, my name is Kate Lazar, and if you have questions or concerns, send them on that letter call, please do. And just know that we have a conversation daily of what we're gonna do, we're meeting again tomorrow, so we're not, don't think that the left stranded, I know it's, for me to say it, because I'm not living in the actual area, but just so you know that you're not gonna stop making noise, and that you're up.
Anyway, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. By the way, this was tabled. Okay, and it's on the YouTube channel, so if you have friends that couldn't make it, let them know. I know.